Coming up, we've got a very busy show. Your feedback is what it's all about. mark@gbnews.com. The emails come straight to my laptop. So, a busy show. Strap yourselves in. It is 9 o'clock. I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News Tonight. And breaking this evening, Nigel Farage has exposed more shocking political bias at the heart of the NatWest group who tried to debank him. In a bombshell 600-page document, staff at Coots are quoted as calling Nigel racist, a shameless grifter and a crackpot, with one even wanting to throw a milkshake at him. And very shortly, Nigel Farage joins me live to give his exclusive reaction to these extraordinary and equally disturbing revelations. Elsewhere, welcome to the UK in 2023, where you can chant anti-Semitic slogans and call for jihad whilst our woke police force just stand by and do nothing. I'll call out these attacks against Israel and democracy as we know it in my big opinion next, and I'm not pulling my punches. The police are institutionally woke, institutionally biased, and institutionally bloody useless. Then my pundits react. Tonight, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, and Belinda de Lucy. Plus, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has launched a stunning attack on the BBC.
If you think there's a balance here between two equal sides, then you are lacking moral clarity. And BBC, I must say, is lacking moral clarity.
So has the corporation's coverage of the Israel-Hamas war brought shame on Britain? John Mayer, Craig Duncan and Charlie Lawson are riled up and ready for the clash. And has the conflict thrown the Labour Party into chaos after 23 councillors quit over comments like these from Keir Starmer?
A siege is appropriate, cutting off power, cutting off water.
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation.
One particular ex-councillor has just cut up her party membership in half, and she lets rip on the Labour Party leader very shortly. As always, you'll get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press. And Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie is uncancelled later in the show. A blockbuster 2 hours coming up with my big opinion next and woke British policing. First, here are the news headlines and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you and good evening. Well, we start this bulletin with some breaking news that's come to us in the last hour. 2 elderly female Israeli captives just released by Hamas have arrived at the Rafah crossing. That's immediately to the south of Gaza, and that's according to Egypt's state news agency. We understand they are now in the hands of the International Red Cross. These are photographs, if you're watching on television, released by the terror group Hamas, and they are believed to be the faces of the 2 hostages that have been released. Israeli media has been commenting tonight, and they have said the terror group released these hostages on humanitarian grounds after a deal brokered between Qatari and Egyptian officials. The International Red Cross saying they are currently transporting them out of Gaza this evening. We understand the families have been informed. It's not known if the hostages that have been released are Israeli citizens or dual nationals. If we get any more detail on that, we'll bring it to you right here, GB News. In the meantime, the Prime Minister has confirmed that the Gaza hospital blast last week was likely caused by a missile launching towards Israel. Rishi Sunak said in the House of Commons today that the blast was caused by a missile or part of a missile that came from within Gaza. He also said the UK is providing an additional £20 million in aid to civilians in Gaza, as well as deploying RAF and Royal Naval personnel to the region.
The British government judges that the explosion was likely caused by a missile, or part of one, that was launched from within Gaza towards Israel. The misreporting of this incident had a negative effect in the region, including on a vital US diplomatic effort and on tensions here at home. We need to learn the lessons and ensure that in future there is no rush to judgment.
Well, the Met Police Commissioner has told the Home Secretary today the government may need to toughen up the law on hate crime and terrorism. It comes after Sir Mark Rowley met with Suella Braverman to discuss the force's decision not to arrest protesters calling for jihad against Israel at demonstrations over the weekend. Sir Mark said horrific and gruesome attacks by Hamas had aggravated our own terrorist threats within the UK, with hate crime against Jewish communities up 13-fold compared to this time last year. So Mark said 34 arrests have been made, and the force is trying to identify a further 22 people from photographs. Meanwhile, a London Underground driver who led a Free Palestine chant on his packed train has been suspended.
Free Palestine! Hope you will have a blessed day today. Look after yourself.
Transport for London saying the driver who led that chant on Saturday has been suspended, pending their investigation. It happened on Saturday as around 100,000 protesters took part in a pro-Palestinian demonstration in London. Footage posted online by a journalist appeared to show the chant being led over the train's speaker system. A man's been arrested in connection with a fire that ripped through Luton Airport's Terminal 2 car park early this month. Bedfordshire police say a man in his 30s has been detained on suspicion of criminal damage several days after the blaze broke out, which was on October the 10th. He's been released on bail pending further inquiries. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service says around 1,500 cars were inside the car park, and it's unlikely that any will be salvageable. And a man who bought a pool table after winning £2.4 million on the lottery is now queuing up to represent England at the European Pool Championships. Neil Jones and his partner, Julie Kirkham, won the money just before Christmas 2010. After getting the table, Mr Jones decided to take advantage of all his free time. He sharpened up his skills and he rose through the ranks. He said, now representing his country in Malta will be his proudest moment. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News.
Everything is hate speech these days, isn't it? Film director Richard Curtis said sorry for saying his character Bridget Jones had an arse bigger than Brazil. In our hypersensitive times, that's probably worthy of 10 years in the gulag. What about the actress Emily Blunt issuing a grovelling apology for joking on a chat show that her waitress at a fast food restaurant was enormous? How dare she state the facts that her server was a porker? Hateful stuff indeed. And apparently everything is racist these days too, including the countryside, mathematics and knitting. So everything is hate and everything is racist. Except actual hate and actual racism. Enter stage left, those pro-Palestinian supporters on the streets of London, supported by rich, woke celebrities on Twitter, chanting anti-Semitic slogans and calling for a jihad, which is a holy war, a call to arms to exterminate every Jew on the planet. And what did those numpties in the Met Police do about it? Surely they acted quickly. After all, they'll send 6 coppers to someone's house after an autistic child says a policewoman looks like a lesbian. You'd think so, but sadly not. The police said no laws were broken at the march on Saturday, where a band of angry thugs called for Muslim armies to launch an offensive to liberate Palestine. According to one report in the Mail newspaper, up to 15 officers stood by and watched this tsunami of anti-Semitic hate. Whether it's taking the knee to the corrupt and discredited BLM organisation, dancing with Extinction Rebellion, or asking Insulate Britain nutters who have glued their hands to the motorway if they'd like a drink or a sandwich, modern policing is institutionally woke, institutionally biased, and institutionally bloody useless. Don't take my word for it. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, has said the hate-filled chants we heard over the weekend amounted to inciting terrorist violence and should have resulted in arrests. Just as the BBC took 2 weeks to work out that people who behead babies are terrorists, so it looks like our police force are unwittingly taking sides with this dangerous death cult as well. Following the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, why are Israel suddenly the bad guys? Why are they being attacked for being attacked and for wanting to defend themselves against attempted genocide? Make it make sense. And is it acceptable for a tube driver to glorify these acts of terror in our capital city? Take a listen to this.
Free Palestine! Hope you will have a blessed day today. Look after yourselves and give a big shout out to everybody. And keep all those people in your prayers. Have a good day.
How do you think Jewish Londoners feel sitting on that train carriage? The driver involved has tonight been suspended by TfL pending an investigation. And what about this charming chap, Lukman Mukim, who said the Hamas attack on the 7th of October, which saw the rape of women, eyes being gouged out and bodies burned alive, as something which, and I quote, made us all very, very happy. He said Hamas were heroes for killing Israelis. Will he have his collar felt? I won't hold my breath. This guy has represented his murderous medieval group at 6 university events in the UK on speaking panels. Of course he has. As long as he doesn't misgender anyone, he'll be absolutely fine. The attack on Israel was despicable and wicked, but so has been the reaction to it ever since. Remember the good old days when terrorism was bad, democratic values were upheld and the rule of law maintained? It seems the main casualty of the October the 7th attack is not just innocent lives in Israel, but the very values that underpin this country, the United Kingdom. Israel's war is now our war too, because those calling for the elimination of Jews hate us as well, and they live among us. It's just that a lot of naive, virtue-signalling lefty numpties cheering this evil on haven't realised it yet. But they will, because they'll be next. Reaction from my pundits tonight. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda DeLucy. Carol, your reaction to the police's blind ignorance this weekend?
It was beyond shocking, and their Weasley, gutless excuse for this was that, on here, they were criticised for because people were shouting jihad. And their Weasley excuse for that is that jihad means many things in Arabic. Well, when it's being chanted against Jews that are pro-Palestinian rally, it only means one thing. The leader of the protest group, he hailed Hamas as heroes. And our cops stood by. I've seen this. I think our country has changed shockingly in the past 2 weeks. It's like anti-Semitism has suddenly become an acceptable form of racism, like it's somehow justified. Right. And it's a poisonous narrative, and which has been solid hook, line and sinker by the police. What I hadn't realised until today was that on Saturday, the cops had advised Jewish people who wanted to go on a walk, like a rally in their area on Saturday. They told them not to do it. They begged them to call it off because they said you could be hurt or intimidated. Well, that's what they're there to stop. And yet, so they stopped Jewish people having their rally and allowed this pro-Palestinian one to go ahead. And I just think, you got to ask yourself, what are the cops for these days? Suella Braverman should have Mark Rowley, the Met Police Chief, should have his backside in Downing Street today, saying, sort yourself out, because what it looks like to me is that our cops are frightened of getting into a rock with anybody. They're frightened, and so as a police force, they are useless. Indeed, which means taking sides with purveyors of terror, Benjamin.
Well, look, you have to laugh when they said, oh, well, jihad can also mean my struggle. Yes. I mean, if it was such a routine part of their terminology, then why have I never heard a Muslim friend or a Muslim on television shout jihad to describe their struggle? That's right. You've just never heard it in that context, right? You'd have to be... I got stuck in a traffic jam. What a jihad that was. Yeah, exactly. You'd have to be incredibly naive, painfully naive. And I think the police are pretty poorly trained on knowing how to deal with this. Of course, I don't accept the nonsense of your monologue about institutionally woke, but what I do think... Well, I think I've pointed it out. Taking the knee to BLM, dancing with Extinction Rebellion, and asking people who have glued themselves to the motorway if they'd like a cup of tea. Can you imagine if that protest on Saturday had involved Black Lives Matter people being shouted at and abused, if it had involved trans activists being shouted at? Do you think they'd sat by and done nothing? Would they hail? I think they're completely wrong to sit by and do nothing, obviously. But you know what? The idea that because they, woke means they might care about women's rights or gay rights and those sorts of issues, that means they're supporting Hamas supporters, doesn't make any sense. But they were. But I do think... the one thing I'd also disagree with Carol on is that I don't think the country has changed in the last 2 weeks. I'm not willing to let these people... It's changed to every Jew in Britain. It has, that's true. It has. But I'm not willing to accept that because these people who are so loud and in some cases violent and aggressive, or so visible, like that tube driver we heard from in the news headlines.
We've allowed...
That is not most people in this country.
It has changed because we've allowed anti-Semitism to flourish on our streets and to not be checked.
Okay.
That's how it's changed.
The only other thing I'd quickly
Belinda's
say-
got a
I was
speech.
gonna say, there was a huge rally of thousands of people in Trafalgar Square for the hostages taken by Hamas and to support the Israeli community, and so there are people standing up on the other side.
It's not just the extremists on these marches, by the way, because I think the waving of Palestinian flags hours after the atrocities of the 7th of October were already deeply offensive and probably hate crimes in their own right, Belinda.
Well, imagine if after the horrific Manchester bombings or 7/7...
hours after.
They're hours after or days after, before the dead were even buried, that there were protest after protest of people who shared the same general cause of all the horrible things that were happening in Syria and Iraq, which was the justification for these terrorists on both events. Imagine how that would make the families feel, and they would simply not be allowed. I think there should have been a period of mourning. I think this has made London a no-go area for Jews every single time they do a protest. It's intimidating. The people who protest know it's going to be infiltrated by Hamas sympathisers and terrorists. They know it's going to wound and scare and intimidate the British Jewish population, and still they march on.
Briefly, Belinda, look, the police have got a really tough job, right? They've got to balance two communities. Their job is to keep people safe. They've made a calculation that ultimately there will be more trouble, more violence, if they allow the groups to fight among themselves.
You know what's happened? Because I don't blame the police entirely. Labour and Conservative governments have opened the doors to radical Islam into the UK. Luckily, it's not the majority, but they're enough to cause this kind of ruckus. They've allowed it to take root. They have not been tough enough, and now they're too scared to challenge them. Now, as Carol mentioned, pro-Jewish, respectful prayer walks have been cancelled.
And by the way, and do you know what the police used as an excuse for cancelling it? They said it was being perceived as an attack on Muslims.
Right.
Well, what
because
was that protest on Saturday?
And do you know who are the biggest victim groups of radical Islamism? Muslims. Worldwide, they're the biggest
including in
group.
Gaza.
So we should all unite against this horrific radical Islam.
Can I just say one other thing, which is the danger of letting that narrative that those people want to set is that you have a new Holocaust denial.
But we don't want them to set it. We don't want them to set it, but it's been very difficult to not set it when this is going on.
All right.
Don't panic.
Well, listen,
You're seeing the start of people trying to deny what's happened and try and have history tell a
You do have to worry about that. Now, listen, you could argue the police have an impossible job. What is your view, Mark, at GBnews.com? Met Chief Mark Rowley said his force is ruthless in tackling anyone who puts their foot over the legal line, adding it is Parliament's job to draw that line, and the thought is that it may be events are illustrating some of the lines are not in the right place. There are frameworks that are more assertive in some respects than ours. There are lessons to be learned, but that is for politicians and Parliament to draw the line. Still to come, Nigel Farage has exposed more shocking political bias at the heart of the NatWest group who tried to debank him in a bombshell 600-page document. Staff at Coutts are quoted as calling Nigel racist, a shameless grifter and a crackpot, with one even wanting to throw a milkshake at him. He joins me live to give his exclusive reaction to these extraordinary and equally disturbing revelations. But first, in the clash, as the former Israeli PM Naftali Bennett says the BBC lacks moral clarity over its coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict, has the corporation brought shame on Britain? Former BBC producers John Mayer and Craig Duncan going head-to-head with Charlie Lawson. Sparks will fly, that's next.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Big reaction to my big opinion. The police are now institutionally woke, institutionally biased and institutionally bloody useless. A big response on email, mark@gbnews.com. Stuart says the police are actually frightened about doing anything unless you're a motorist doing 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. I despair what is happening to my country, says Stuart. Gordon says, gutless government. I'm saddened by how the government of ours sits back and allows this behaviour of chanting hate. Tarquin says, hi Mark, the police need to get a backbone and so do all of the politicians and make this country great again. This would not be happening under Margaret Thatcher's Conservative Party. And last but not least, Mark says the police have one job, to enforce the law and to arrest anybody who breaks it. They've forgotten what they're there for. Keep those emails coming. mark@gbnews.com. Nigel Farage on his shocking new debanking revelations coming up. But first, The Clash. And the BBC is still refusing to call Hamas terrorists, and now even the former Prime Minister of Israel has called out the corporation live on air. Take a look at the astonishing spat yesterday between Naftali Bennett and the Beebs presenter Victoria Derbyshire.
And I understand that BBC has taken a side of on the Gazan side because all your questions are only about the Gazan civilians.
That's not true.
You haven't asked one question.
That's not
you
true.
haven't asked one question
I began
about
by
those children. From the very beginning of this interview, you just are asking me about them.
Mr.
But
Bennett,
it seems
that
that you
is
care
not true.
little about our side. Oh, it is. You keep on caring only about one side, but that is the BBC way. And if you think there's a balance here between two equal sides, then you are lacking moral clarity.
Meanwhile, the Israeli president is not happy either, slamming the BBC's reporting as atrocious. Even Rishi Sunak throwed a bit of shade in the BBC's direction. Take a listen.
explosion was likely caused by a missile or part of one that was launched from within Gaza towards Israel. The misreporting of this incident had a negative effect in the region, including on a vital US diplomatic effort and on tensions here at home.
So has the corporation brought shame on Britain? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.com or at gbnews on Twitter. And do vote in the poll. But to debate this now, I'm delighted to welcome former BBC producer John Mayer, ex-Coronation Street star Charlie Lawson, and former BBC series producer and the star of the excellent YouTube channel Flooded, Craig Duncan. Craig, can I start with you? Your reaction to the BBC's reporting of this Israel crisis over the last 2 weeks?
Well, I've been a little bit shocked because they seem to don't know what a terrorist is, or they seem to have lost the ability to look up definitions. I've got with me, Mark, when I was at the BBC, we were all given this book. Can you see that? It is the producer guidelines, and this was a Bible for us. And in it, at the very, very beginning, the first thing we have to talk about, or they had to tell us or teach us about, was impartiality. And then there's a section on the inside called number 15, terrorism and national security. There's even a section about how to interview terrorists. So I'm not quite sure how they've forgotten that they wrote that. And where they're at now, because they seem to be just in complete denial that terrorists exist.
OK, well, John, you disagree with what Craig's just said. Why?
This man is talking complete tosh. This is the BBC. It's not the Israeli Broadcasting Corporation. It's the BBC. And in my opinion, they're doing a cracking job in Israel. And you know what? For the first time in my memory, they're admitting mistakes. They admitted that they got the hospital wrong, and they've apologised for that. They admitted a few other things. By the way,
they got the hospital wrong because of Israel bias. They saw an exploded hospital and thought that's the Israelis. They made a judgment rather than a journalistic stating a journalistic fact.
I've heard the number 2 in news apologise for that publicly last week.
Born out of prejudice.
Not born out of prejudice, born out of time constraints and
it doesn't take long to say we don't know who bombed the hospital.
Mark, which organisation has a journalist in Gaza? The BBC. He's not very good, but they have a journalist there. Nobody else does. ITV are doing very well. So does the BBC. You know, the BBC has done really, really well. Frontline reporting in a bloody difficult situation. I will criticise one thing. I thought the interview with the Archbishop of Canterbury last night was a bit arsenic, frankly, and they shouldn't have used it. But they are, by and large, you know, they put their stars there, and the stars are performing over and over again. And you know what? They're not calling them terrorists. They're saying the UK government calls them terrorists. They don't use the word terrorist as coming from the BBC. Quite rightly too.
Gaslighting Israeli victims. Listen, Charlie, let's talk about this. By the way, GB News has excellent representation in Israel. Charlie Peters has been broadcasting live from Israel.
How many reporters have you got there? How many reporters?
Charlie is all you need, because you get one Charlie Peters is as good as 10 BBC journalists. Why? Because he tells the truth and he's not biased and he's not anti-Israel.
Right, it's hardly journalism.
There you go. Oh, listen, Charlie Peters didn't get it wrong about who exploded a hospital in Gaza. Charlie, your reaction to the BBC's coverage. Have you worked for the BBC much yourself?
Yeah, just for about 42 years, mate. And I would have to say that the ground crew, so to speak, and the cast, I've worked with Republicans, Palestinian supporters a lot, and they've absolutely been fine when you're making the programme. But there definitely is an editorial bias. There's no doubt about that. You two fellas, especially you, John, would be old enough to remember whenever we had Martin Bell in Northern Ireland, and the people of Northern Ireland, the Protestant Unionist community considered him completely biased, and he was shafted. He was done for it. You know what I mean? Look, the BBC, I mean, John Humphreys, for God's sake, you know, I mean, he was running the world at one, and I think he was brave enough and open enough to come out and say that there was educationally a political slant or whatever. We've all known that about the BBC.
So should the BBC call the IRA terrorists? Did the BBC call them terrorists? The BBC was straight down the line in Northern. I know, I worked for them there. They were straight down the line.
Well done,
as they are in Israel.
Darling. Good for you. I lived there too.
Yes, well, I lived there as well, on and off. But
Oi, John. John, I'm just telling you how the unionist stroke loyalist people felt about the BBC. Not what you think about the BBC. You were employed by them, mister. I'm talking about how the people on the ground felt about your organisation, okay?
So it wasn't the Unionist Broadcasting Corporation, nor is it the Israeli Broadcasting Corporation. It's the BBC, remember?
Well, the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland is a political union, and the BBC is the national broadcaster. Craig, what does this coverage tell us about the culture of the BBC?
You see, I think that the thing is, I think people in the UK love the BBC. We love the BBC, but we are furious with them because they seem to be, the custodians of the BBC currently seem to be undermining it and what it used to stand for. I've interviewed people to come and work at the BBC, and I've had superiors next to me who have overridden my decisions, because I've interviewed people who took to be directors on shows, and they've had no they've demonstrated no ability to be, or qualifications to be decent directors for what we were looking for. And his argument to me later on was that we should employ this person because she's funky. She's got a funky look. She seems funky, and we've seen it. We've seen the BBC went through a huge problem. They were really struggling. So they were jihading back in the 90s because channels like Channel 5 were coming to fruition and Channel 4 were doing well. Channel 4 were very, very edgy. The BBC was seen as being a bunch of stuffed shirts and very old-fashioned. So they tried to be a little bit more sort of funky, I guess, is the word that they started using. As such, they started employing freelancers from sort of in the independent sector who came in. They didn't care about this. This doesn't exist anymore. This isn't given to staff anymore. This is just basically, thrown away, and everyone's using a website now.
Let Craig finish.
So people aren't really sure how to.
Craig, finish your point.
I think people at the BBC, because everyone's a freelancer as well, and the BBC isn't really responsible for making a lot of the shows that it puts on air. It's all being made by independent production companies who don't care about the guidelines that I've just shown you. And as a result of a lot of the independent sector coming in, it has become, unfortunately, a very sort of left-wing biased channel. And we don't hear any pushback against the BBC from the left. We don't hear the left retweeting.
Okay. Now, John, the clock's against us, but Mark Dolan, GBNews, we're all about balance. Can you have closing thoughts from you, John, if you may?
Yeah, I mean, this man specialises in talking nonsense. Every independent producer has to abide by the producer guidelines. I know, I've done it. They have to, and they have a BBC person editorial responsible.
Okay.
The BBC is impartial. It's the British Broadcasting Corporation, not the Israeli Broadcasting Corporation, nor the Unionist Broadcasting Corporation.
Well, I think it is the Unionist Broadcasting Corporation, but I beg to differ with you on that one. Listen, Craig, Charlie, John, I wish we had longer. What a debate. But let's go to the BBC now, who have said our starting point is always impartiality, and we take that incredibly seriously. That's why we take so much effort to get our coverage of significant and complex world events right. In amongst thousands of hours of news broadcasting, there will always be some errors. Where we do get things wrong, we always hold up our hands, as we did this week when one of our correspondents was wrong to speculate, along with others, about the cause of the Al-Ali hospital explosion. Well, your verdict is in. 91% of you agree that the BBC has brought shame on Britain, whilst 9% say it has not. Coming up, as 2.2 million claim benefits without needing to find work, has the UK become something for nothing as a country? Also, I'll get reaction to that from entrepreneur and star of the hit programme The Secret Millionaire, Mike Green. But first, Nigel Farage has exposed more shocking political bias at the heart of the NatWest group. He's next.
I will. Cheers, fella. God bless.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new
It's
teeth.
your new
I
teeth.
know.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Time now for GB News star Nigel Farage and new bombshell revelations from his debanking scandal, where he has sensationally unearthed previously confidential but absolutely outrageous comments made about him by snooty NatWest staff. In a huge cache of documents given to Nigel by NatWest after he made a subject access request to the bank, a process where someone can demand all data and documents from a company which features their name or details, Nigel discovered staff saying they would throw milkshakes over him and celebrated him being debanked by mocking, "Have we single-handedly driven him out of the country? I hope that knocked him down a peg," is what one worker said. Nigel and other staff told colleagues they'd have paid to be the person to debank you. Is the rot as bad as you'd feared?
Worse. No, it's worse. I mean, I thought after the Coots files, it couldn't possibly get worse. And that's what I put in the subject access request to NatWest, which by law should come back in 30 days. But the loophole is they said it was so complex that they wouldn't come back for 3 months. And that is what you're seeing today. If this was their attempt to sort of kick this into the long grass and hope it goes away, I tell you what, they've picked on the wrong chap, because I'm not going to put up with this. This is the culture that the Queen of Woke, Dame Alison Rose, brought into the head office and throughout the bank of NatWest and indeed with subsidiaries like Coots. It's funny, isn't it, in life? Those who talk about diversity and inclusion are actually the most illiberal, narrow-minded people you could ever want to meet. She is responsible for this culture. Now, the significance of the timing of this should not be lost on anybody. On Thursday of this week, there is a full board meeting of NatWest, and on Friday morning we'll get the quarterly figures. After the Coutts debacle, they appointed what they called an independent person to come in to look at what had happened. Travers Smith are a city company whose emeritus chair has described Brexiteers as racists, xenophobes, and Little Englanders. Well, some independence for you. But at this Thursday's meeting, they will decide on which terms Dame Alison leaves NatWest. Bear in mind, folks, this is not a private company. We bailed these people out of their greed and stupidity. 38.6% of this bank is owned by you, the taxpayer. And she is on course to walk out of Thursday's meeting with 11.5 million sterling. Just think about that. To be rewarded for failure, rewarded for breaking every single code under banking law since it first existed, under the Financial Conduct Authority regulations. She's on the verge of walking out with 11.5 million quid. And nearly 40% of that will be paid for by GB News viewers and the rest of the country. And what I want with these revelations is for the world to understand that these people who have politicized both public and private corporations should not be rewarded for failure, should not be rewarded for prejudice and for bias. She must not walk out with that vast sum of money. And as for the staff working in an organization who wouldn't even have their jobs if it wasn't for us bailing them out, they should, all of those people who've made these vile comments should be suspended and investigated.
Well, these comments, Nigel, these comments are vile. You've been described as an awful human being. What's the crackpot saying now? They want to drive you out of the country. They want to throw milkshake at you, which is an assault. Now, Nigel, I know you well. You're no snowflake, but does it hurt reading stuff like this?
No, not really. It doesn't hurt at all. I am so used to the illiberalism of the so-called liberals that I can deal with it. It's horrible stuff. Although, Mark, maybe crackpot. Well, maybe they've got a point there. I'll give them that one.
Nigel, I need to know what these extreme opinions are that you have, because you're arguably the most consequential politician of your generation. 17.4 million people voted for Brexit. So what are these extreme opinions of which they speak?
Well, I have to accept I'm guilty of the charge of extremism, obviously. I believe in self-governing democratic nations. I believe that we should be able to choose the people that make our laws, and once every 5 years, sack them. I think that the integrity of our borders is something fundamental. After all, the first duty of government is to protect its citizens and to stop bad people or terrorists coming into our country. Worst of all, in the charges I've seen today, worst of all, I do not agree with the bank's view on climate change. You see, I am skeptical. I am skeptical about net zero. Now, they hoped and prayed, as you're showing on the screen now, that the press would think that somehow this all meant that I was a bit dodgy when it came to financial matters. But nothing could be further from the truth. And it all goes to show the arrogance of those in power, the march of the woke brigade through our public and private corporations. And I have the honor to be the first person to genuinely have the voice and the position to stand up and fight back against this. And when I, as it were, came out in the summer as being debanked, a lot of other people came out. And I want everybody who's been debanked or treated badly to put in their subject access requests. Let's turn this culture around.
Indeed, Nigel, your legacy is Brexit. You're the godfather of Brexit. I think you helped Boris Johnson win the 2019 general election, which kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10, which would have been a national security and economic disaster. I think your other great legacy, as well as GB News, is going to be standing up for ordinary people who are caught up in this debanking scandal. You're a high-profile case, but this is the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
1 million people, 1 million people and businesses have been debanked over the course of the last 4 years. Their means of existing in a modern 21st century society have been taken away from them. And that, in the end, is what made me go public about all of this. You know, I could have just crawled away, but I thought, no, if I stand up and fight, I won't be just fighting for me, I'll be fighting on behalf of so many other people who don't have a voice. But Mark, let me pick you up on something. When you say my legacy, I'm not on the verge of croaking it. I'm not on the verge of retiring. There are many, many more fights and campaigns left in me, believe you me.
Including leader of the Conservative Party after the next election, Nigel. Yes or no? You can tell me, we're pals.
I have no idea. All I can say is that the centre of gravity of Conservative Party members and voters is miles away from their parliamentary party. They will lose the next election. They deserve to lose the next election, and they need to lose the next election. Otherwise, we'll stay on with two brands of big state, high tax, high spend, surveillance control, forms of social democracy. Only by losing can we actually get a party that stands up for the liberty, freedom, and opportunity and enterprise of the individual. And if I'm able to help that debate in any way after the election, do you know what? I'll roll my sleeves up and I'll be there.
He didn't say no. You heard it here first. Nigel, more power to you. We'll catch up soon. Of course, Nigel is back tomorrow at 7 on GB News. A NatWest Group spokesperson has said we've written to Mr Farage to apologise sincerely for the deeply inappropriate comments made about him and the poor behaviours displayed. Neither are consistent with the standards of service that our clients should expect. The group has commissioned an independent review into recent events, phase 1 of which has been delivered to the board, and will complete the necessary processes and publish the key findings along with the group's response as soon as possible. We're determined to learn the necessary lessons from this so that in the future we live up to the high expectations that our clients rightly place upon us. Look, my takeaway from that is that Nigel Farage is going to take over the leadership of the Conservative Party after the next election. OK, lots more to come, folks. Yes, indeed. Don't forget the email mark@gbnews.com. But coming up, as English acting legend Dame Maureen Lipman slams the bleeding, heartless Liberals who failed to condemn Hamas, have celebs shown their total hypocrisy by failing to call out terrorism? My panel debate that later. But next, as 2.2 million people now claim benefits without needing to find work, has the UK become a something-for-nothing country? I'm joined by the entrepreneur and star of the Channel 4 programme, The Secret Millionaire, Mike Green, to discuss that next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. RITV going to wind up axing this morning. I'll be asking Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie. But first, the number of Brits who claim benefits without having to work rose by 50,000 last month alone, meaning that the total figure is up to 2.2 million people. Ministers are said to be alarmed at the sudden rise, and in his speech at Tory conference, the PM promised to act.
We must end the national scandal where our benefit system declares that more than 2 million people of working age are incapable of actually doing any. That's not conservative. That's not compassionate. That must change.
Indeed, the government are looking at reforming the assessment system through which people can be signed off sick. However, the charity Disability Rights UK said the proposed changes are less to do with helping disabled people into work than a cynical attempt to impose conditionality and to reduce benefit payments. Let's get reaction from top entrepreneur and star of the Channel 4 hit The Secret Millionaire, Mike Green. Mike, you're a self-made man with a rags to riches story. Do you think Britain has a work ethic problem?
I do, and it's quite sickening. It was interesting there to hear Rishi talk about it as a scandal, and what's more disappointing is after 13 years of the Tories being in, he's talking about it as if it's an outcome of someone else's party that needs to be addressed. I think, for me, everyone would supporting the people who can't work or need support. The problem is we're supporting a lot of people with benefits. Why is it called benefits? It shouldn't be a benefit. It's a sick note. It's a fraud benefit, if you like, that these people are getting, because many of them are frauds. They are absolutely taking the mickey and boasting about it down the pubs sometimes. We've got many people who need help, but there's many, many more who are just exploiting the easy system that the UK creates for them.
And in fact, getting up in the morning, going out to work, putting in a shift, it's not just good for the economy, it's good for the person involved, good for your health, your mental health and your physical health.
Yeah, I was once having a conversation with a doctor from Cornwall, and he said, I'm a terrible GP. I get lots of complaints about me. And I said, why is that? Then he said, well, because sometimes people come in, they say they're a bit down, they're a bit depressed, they haven't got any energy. And he said, I write them a prescription, then they get really angry. I said, why is that? He said, because I write walk an hour a day or get some fresh air. They're sitting at home watching Jeremy Kyle, getting depressed. They need to get out, get to work, get their body moving, contribute to society that they want to benefit from. And we've got too many people that are black belts in benefit fraud that are exploiting our country.
Well, indeed. Listen, Mike, welfare is important for those who are unable to work. My heart goes out to them. That is why we pay our taxes. But for many others, it's a trap, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think I agree with you. Everyone agrees with you that the people who can't work, that are really suffering, need help. We want to look after them. But people who are on sick or long-term sick or different reasons for not working has gone up 62% in the last 10 years. It's now at a level where we just cannot support it. Yeah. And it won't be long at this rate before we'll have more people being supported than we have got working. In fact, they're probably already there if we look at the different age groups in that. It's just not sustainable, Mark.
Indeed. This is an important cultural change that needs to happen. It's not just policy, is it, that it pays to work, but the attitude to work has got to change. It's different in America, isn't it, where most people do go out to work and put a shift in?
Well, and there's just less benefits. I mean, what I feel really sad is there's lots of people at the lower level of income, and many in retail, in hospitality, in support services, who are working hard, working full time and not being able to afford to live, literally having to sofa surf, even though they're working hard. I think we should be looking to put funds into paying them a more livable wage. But those that can work and don't work, I think we should make it more painful, because we shouldn't make it easy for people to sponge off the system.
My thanks to top entrepreneur, former Brexit Party candidate Mike Green. Mike will catch up shortly. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. Has Britain become a something-for-nothing country? Coming up, has the Israel-Hamas conflict thrown the Labour Party into chaos after 23 councillors quit over Keir Starmer suggesting Israel has the right to blockade Gaza? The now ex-councillor, Dr Sherry Delfani, lets rip on the Labour Party leader soon. But what does this civil war tell us about what Labour would be like in office? And next, as English acting legend Dame Maureen Lipman slams the bleeding heartless Liberals who fail to condemn Hamas, have celebs shown their total hypocrisy by failing to call out terrorism? My panel debate that in just a moment's time. Plus, your emails, mark at gbnews.com. They are coming in thick and fast, let me tell you, including this one, which is all about the work ethic in this country. And it is from Ashok, who says, "Hi, Mark. Britain has become a sofa couch country in welfare surplus and welfare fetishism." And on the BBC, Richard says, "If I hear someone say we love the BBC one more time, I will pull my hair out. Sell it off to the highest bidder." There you go. It's all about opinions. More to come.
Hello, very good evening. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. It's already started to turn a bit wet and windy across some parts, but the wind and rain will become more widespread as we go overnight into Tuesday. There's a system pushing its way northwards up from France, but also a separate front that's currently making its way northeastwards across southwestern parts of the UK. This will bring some heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across southwest Wales in particular, and then spread into more central parts through the early hours. Also some persistent rain starting off in the southeast, pushing into more eastern northeastern England through the early hours of Tuesday too. A fairly mild night for many, though it could be a little chilly across the northwest of Scotland, perhaps a touch of frost here. For many, Tuesday is going to be a much wetter picture than on Monday. Heavy persistent rain across northern eastern parts of England. Could see some high totals, could be some disruption here, chance of some flooding too. Elsewhere, some bright sunny spells, but also a scattering of showers, and these showers could turn heavy, perhaps even thundery towards the south. Temperatures near normal for the time of year. We're looking at highs around 14 or 15 Celsius in the south, cooler further north. Into Wednesday, we will see a spell of wet weather across the southeast to start, and also some rain pushing into eastern parts of Scotland, perhaps northeast England. That could turn a little bit heavy at times, and coming so close to the heavy rain we saw last week, it could make ongoing issues worse. And otherwise, as we go through the rest of the week, we're staying with the unsettled picture with further wind and rain, but temperatures near normal.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 10 o'clock, I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News Tonight. Lovely to have your company. Virtue signalling celebs who failed to condemn Hamas are sensationally called out for their bleeding, heartless liberalism. The likes of Steve Coogan joined thousands of artists to accuse Israel of war crimes without once mentioning Hamas's horrific terror attack on Jews. But after being savaged by common-sense Brits, including Dame Maureen Lipman, have woke celebs shown their true colours by failing to call out terrorism? That's the big debate next with my top panel. Tonight, Carol Malone, whose glasses and her earrings are colour-coded. This isn't just thrown together. The Val Doonican tribute act that is Benjamin Butterworth.
He doesn't know who that is. I have no
idea. And the elegant and always right Belinda Lucy.
I've never had that before.
Now, also tonight, 23 Labour councillors resign and MPs are left outraged after Keir Starmer suggests Israel has the right to blockade Gaza. So does the toxic row threaten to tear Labour apart before their likely return to government? Former Milton Keynes councillor Dr Sherry Delfani has a stark warning for the nation shortly. Also on the way, why has there been no outrage about alleged racism to a white England rugby player in the World Cup? And with ITV in chaos amid the scramble to find a replacement for Holly Willoughby on This Morning, is it a matter of time before the show is axed? Fleet Street icon, a man that knows how to axe things, Kelvin McKenzie gives his expert analysis in Uncancelled. And finally, with our prisons overflowing, should Britain follow California and essentially decriminalise shoplifting? Or should we get even tougher by naming and shaming offenders? What about tagging them or painting them orange? Tonight's panel fill their bags with that shortly. Also, I'll be crowning tonight's Union Jackass and Greatest Britain before the night is out. So a busy hour to come. First, here are your headlines and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the developing story tonight on GB News is that 2 elderly female Israeli captives have been released by the terror group Hamas and they've arrived at the Rafah crossing. That's immediately to the south of Gaza and according to Egypt's state news agency. They're now in the hands, we understand, of the International Red Cross. Egyptian media released footage showing the 2 women freed by Hamas being transferred from a Red Cross vehicle and into ambulances. If you're watching on television, you can see they're embracing one another there. They were released, we're told, on humanitarian grounds after a deal brokered between Qatari and Egyptian officials. It's not known if the hostages are Israeli citizens or dual nationals. We understand their families have been informed, and one of the hostages' grandsons has told reporters, "We're happy that my grandmother is back." This brings the total number of hostages released to 4 out of more than 220 still held by Hamas. Well, here the Prime Minister confirmed today that the Gaza hospital blast last week was likely caused by a missile launching towards Israel. Rishi Sunak told the House of Commons that the Al Ahli hospital blast was caused by a missile or part of a missile that came from within Gaza. He also said that the UK is providing an additional £20 million in aid to civilians in Gaza, as well as deploying RAF and Royal Navy assets to the region.
The British government judges that the explosion was likely caused by a missile, or part of one, that was launched from within Gaza towards Israel. The misreporting of this incident had a negative effect in the region, including on a vital US diplomatic effort and on tensions here at home. We need to learn the lessons and ensure that in future there is no rush to judgment.
Well, the Met Police Commissioner has told the Home Secretary the government may need to toughen the law on hate crime and terrorism. It comes after Sir Mark Rowley met with Suella Braverman to discuss the force's decision not to arrest protesters calling for jihad against Israel at demonstrations over the weekend. Sir Mark also said that horrific and gruesome attacks by Hamas have aggravated our own terrorist threats within the UK, with hate crime against Jewish communities up 13-fold compared to this time last year. Sir Mark said that 34 arrests have been made so far. The force is trying to identify another 22 from photography. And 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of racially aggravated criminal damage tonight and inciting racial hatred, according to the Met Police. That's after officers were called to reports of a group trying to remove and set fire to Union flags in Twickenham in southwest London earlier on this evening. It's alleged they'd made remarks about the ongoing conflict in Israel. Meanwhile, a London Underground driver who led a Free Palestine chant on his packed train has been suspended.
Free Palestine! Hope you will have a blessed day today. Look after yourself.
Well, Transport for London is saying the driver who appeared to lead that chant on Saturday has been suspended pending further investigation into the incident, which happened on Saturday as around 100,000 protesters took part in a pro-Palestinian demonstration in London. Footage posted online by a journalist appeared to show the chant being led over the train's speaker system. Now, a man who bought a pool table after winning £2.4 million on the National Lottery is now queuing up to represent England at the European Pool Championships. Neil Jones and his partner Julie Kirkham won the money just before Christmas 2010. After getting the table, Mr Jones took advantage of all the free time he had on his hands to sharpen up his skills on the pool table, and he rose through the ranks. He said representing England in Malta will be his proudest moment at the championships. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at tomorrow's front pages. And we'll just have a look at the Metro. Sleepover massacre inquiry, 51 deadly errors. A catalogue of 51 very stark failures by probation staff contributed to a violent psychopath's brutal hammer murder of his partner and 3 children at a sleepover. A coroner has ruled. A devastating story. More papers to come, but reacting to the big stories of the day, my brilliant panel tonight, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone. Always worth reading, always worth hearing. Journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, who's very much the clothes horse of this programme. And
no.
Always shooting from the hip, dropping truth bombs aplenty, former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy, who's dressed for the summer, which is lucky because the studio is approximately 800 degrees centigrade.
Can we just point out, he had no idea when you referenced Val Doonican, who Val Doonican
I said to Carol, who is it? And she said it's a much-loved entertainer. I said we have
we
have a lot in common then.
Yes. No, yes. There you go. Well, those were the days when TV presenters would randomly break out into song. I might do that tonight. Now, listen, over 200 public figures in the UK have come together to sign the October Declaration. I am pleased to say I'm one of those people. It's a letter condemning anti-Semitism against Jewish people and, quote, calling Hamas out for what it is, a terror organisation. This is, of course, what Steve Coogan and 2,000 of his fellow lovies failed to do when they signed a pro-Palestine letter that accused the British government of aiding and abetting what they call Israeli war crimes. Better late than never, Coogan has since condemned the Hamas terror group in an updated statement last night, calling their attacks on civilians horrific. But hitting out at her acting compatriots, the Coronation Street legend Dame Maureen Lipman has said these bleeding, heartless liberals care so deeply for the Palestinians that they espouse their cause at the expense of every other oppressed people of the world. Shame, shame, shame on every one of you. Dame Maureen has herself signed the October Declaration. So, Carol, have those other celebs shown their true colours by failing to call out terrorism?
Oh, completely. I mean, Coogan, Coogan is I'm not going to say. But,
he's a talented guy,
all
right?
the voices that we normally hear on stuff, the ones that are always on Twitter, calling out what they think is the cause of the poor and the oppressed. People like Gary Lineker, people like Emma Watson, people like Emma Watson.
You described Gary Lineker a couple of weeks ago as a dangerous man.
I think he's a really dangerous man. But, however, he's not opened his mouth on this, interestingly, because one, I suspect, I think he's a bit thick and I don't think he quite gets what's going on. But anyway, but the other two, Emma Thompson is certainly not thick and we've not heard a word from her. All of these people should be now condemning Hamas and they're not. And I thought Maureen Lipman today, I've always been an admirer of hers, but today what she said was really powerful. She called out her entire profession, which is quite a big thing to do. She said actors are supposed to be empathetic people. And she said to me, you are all devoid of empathy. You cannot see an inch above beyond your own prejudices. And she said, shame on each and every one of you. And she's right. And she said, the other quote she said was, she's the only good Jew to these people is a homeless, victimised, impoverished one. Yeah. So she's actually slating her entire profession. And I think it's really important that she does. And she points out that, she said, we keep on hearing that, the Palestinians aren't Hamas. But as she points out, she said, the Palestinians have elected Hamas 17 years ago and keep on electing them in. They chose this group, this terror group, to lead them. And also, it's left them impoverished because all the aid that they get from around the world for the country, for the Palestinians, is being spent on them and their arms. And so they've left the Palestinians impoverished. So, when are Palestinians going to realise that this group doesn't give a stuff about them, whether they live or whether they die?
Indeed. I mean, pipes that have been sent to the region for water, for fresh water, have been repurposed as weapons. That's the situation. Benjamin, I'll come to you in a second, because I want to hear the other side of this argument. But, Belinda, so much for the Be Kind crowd.
Oh, my gosh, this sort of woke, liberal, lovey ideology. It's not about...
The good people, the nice people.
The hashtag Be Kind. It's not about minorities. It's not about victims. It's about corporate virtue signalling points. They'll jump on BLM. They'll jump on trans activism. They'll jump on anything they think that will give them these points in that corporate sort of lovey world. And it's about power and control as well. If it had been about the victims, they would have said mentioned the horrific attack first and foremost.
Exactly.
There's the worst attack on Jews in a day since the Holocaust. Any natural human reaction to that is of utter and complete devastation for humanity, and they're quite happy to verbal diarrhea about every other political point scoring
and compare everything to Nazism except actual Nazism in 2023.
Well, their silence is deafening.
And it's interesting that someone like Gary Lineker throws the word Nazism around all the time. And here we have an example of exactly that, and we've not heard a peep from
It's because they think, basically, the Jewish population should lie down and take it. And it's a horrific anti-Semitism that lies underneath this, that is promoted by the liberal lovies through their silence.
But also, I think the celebs a lot of them are frightened to speak out on this because they're frightened of what it means to them. It's easy for them to do it from the privacy of their own home, to talk about immigrants and all the rest of it, and to support them. But when you have a cause which actually could have them singled out in one way or another, they hide, they cower.
Well, indeed so. I mean, Gary Lineker never used the word Nazi, but he's invoked memories of the 1930s, which I think is the same thing. Benjamin, there is a flip side to this. Steve Coogan, the other signatories to that letter, they're worried about the deaths of many thousands of Palestinians. They're worried about alleged human rights abuses by the Israeli military. All they're worried about is human suffering. That's the balance to that one. What do you think?
I suppose so. I don't know why you're asking me for the other side, because I don't disagree with what's been said. In principle, I might not use the same...
But is that not a fair point, that what they're doing is they're worried about Palestine, which, let's be honest, is the kind of centre of hell at the moment?
Well, worrying about the Palestinian people and the civilians, especially the children who are being injured and killed, is obviously entirely legitimate. And I'm sure Maureen Lipman feels that way too.
Absolutely.
The problem wasn't that they cared about those civilians and were highlighting the plight. That's absolutely fine. The problem is that some of these people, many of these people, did it having not expressed the horror and the outrage at the attack that killed 1,200 it is innocent Israelis 2 weeks prior to what's going on right now.
But what does that silence say about them?
Yeah,
Does that not tell us exactly what they think about this conflict? Because it kind of does to me, the fact that they didn't speak out at the start.
I agree with Maureen. Shame on them.
OK, well, there you go. Look, to be fair to Coogan, he has set the record straight and has explicitly condemned the Hamas attacks a couple of days after signing that letter. Now, listen, folks, have we got time for Gordon Ramsay? Yes, on to another out-of-touch celeb, TV chef Gordon Ramsay. I've got to say, met the guy once, very charming. He's usually the one dishing out the foul-mouthed insults, but in the last 24 hours, he's found himself on the receiving end. Speaking to Jake Humphrey on his high-performance podcast, the millionaire chef stands accused of telling the least relatable story ever. Take a listen.
We were young, we were stupid, and we were skint. I remember going to ask her father if I could borrow 20 grand for the deposit for a flat that we fell in love with. And I thought this was all going well. Lunch is good. I'll pay for lunch. And I said, oh, by the way, about that deposit, you know, Tan and I, we've got half of it. We need the other 20 grand. I'll pay you back in a year. He said, OK, here's what I'll do. I'll have another lunch with you when you sell your Porsche. I thought, but you clever is the best advice he ever gave me. Sell your Porsche.
Oh dear, I swore when I saw that clip myself. Porsche or not, I'd call that a car crash. Coming up, with our prisons overflowing, should Britain follow California and decriminalise shoplifting, or should we get even tougher by naming and shaming offenders, or tagging them, or painting them orange? My panel debate that shortly. But next, 23 Labour councillors resign and MPs are left outraged after Keir Starmer suggests Israel has the right to blockade Gaza. So does the toxic row threaten to tear Labour apart before their likely return to government? Former Milton Keynes councillor Dr Sherry Delfani has a stark warning for the nation shortly.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Now, 23 Labour councillors have sensationally resigned from their positions as Sir Keir Starmer's position on the Israel-Hamas conflict threatens to tear the party apart. MPs are also said to be furious and demanding clarity from Starmer after he made these comments to LBC's Nick Ferrari 2 weeks ago. Take a listen.
I'm very clear. Israel does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation.
Sir Keir has since backtracked, first time for everything, insisting that he meant Israel should only defend itself within international law. But the damage seems to have been done, with Starmer now standing accused of condoning Israeli war crimes. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Dr. Sherry Delfani, who is one of those 23 councillors who have just resigned. Dr. Delfani, thank you so much for joining us. Why have you quit the Labour Party?
Good evening to you. I quit the Labour Party because of the toxic and bullying environment, and the final straw was the position of Keir Starmer, of course.
But you say toxic. Surely the Labour Party was a lot more toxic under the previous leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who described Hamas, the terror group, as his friends.
It is absolutely correct to firmly condemn the killing of innocent civilians on both sides. And what Hamas has done, there is no room for negotiation. It's absolutely horrific, and it is no room to just, justify what they have done to Israeli civilians. But what Keir Starmer has made the position at this situation, he chose to provide disturbing divisive act. And also his action has led more hatred, tension and prejudice towards the community. That's how I feel.
Would you condemn people waving Palestinian flags on the 7th of October, just hours after women were raped, bodies were scorched and babies beheaded?
Yes.
A short answer to a straight question, which I appreciate. Now, anti-Semitic incidents have increased by 3,000% in the last 2 weeks. Surely it's sensible for the leader of the opposition to reassure people who are Jewish in this country that they have his full support, which involves Israel defending itself.
Absolutely right. As I mentioned earlier on, this is no way to justify what Hamas has done to civilians. But what is caused more disturbing by Keir Starmer's position as a human rights lawyer background, he could, address it in a better way, something like temporary ceasefire to make sure that the both sides civilians, Israeli and Gazan, to be moved in a safe zone, and then of course, this Hamas has to be, punished for what they have done. But public was expecting more sort of sympathy towards not Hamas, towards the civilians.
However, the argument is that Israel needs to defend itself. It has a military objective now, which is to eliminate Hamas. So this genocide, this attempted genocide of the Jews in the Middle East does not materialise. Israel has a right to defend herself, and Keir Starmer is right to support that.
Israel has a right to defend herself. But the question here is, as I mentioned earlier on, the international law has to be mentioned and addressed, and the civilian has to be protected.
But you want a ceasefire. That's different from respecting international law. Israel dropped leaflets in North Gaza telling communities in that region to head south because an assault was coming.
By the time, I'm not quite sure really what happened at that case. But what I'm addressing in the ceasefire is, to providing, because it has happened when Azerbaijan and Armenia, they had, the war, and it happened in Syria as well. The international bodies has agreed for the temporary 24 hours or 48 hours, the ceasefire until they make sure that the civilians have been moved to the safe zone. That's what I mean. To prevent more life, to lose.
Dr. Sherry Delfani, thank you so much for joining us and for your time. We did contact the Labour Party for comment. We have not received a response as of yet. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. I just wonder whether this gives you a flavour of what life would be like if Keir Starmer was in number 10. Let's be honest, the country is broke, and when the public sector unions don't get the pay rise they're hoping for, I think there will be all-out civil war, and that's before you get to Labour's position on Israel. However, we've got other fish to fry. Coming up in Uncancelled, why has there been no outrage about alleged racism to a white England rugby player in the World Cup? Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie gives his expert analysis shortly, and he'll also sink his teeth into whether it's a matter of time before ITV acts this morning. But next in a media buzz, with our prisons overflowing, should Britain follow California and decriminalise shoplifting, or should we get even tougher by naming and shaming offenders, tagging them, painting them orange, purple or yellow? My panel debate that next, and let me tell you, it's going to be feisty. See you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. OK, let's have a look at tomorrow's papers. Where should we start, Josh? OK, let's have the Daily Mail first of all, and videos that prove the depravity of Hamas terrorists. Israel today unveiled horrific video footage it said proved the true barbarism of the Hamas terror attacks on October the 7th. The images, most of which were too graphic to be published, were shown to journalists in Tel Aviv earlier today. Several viewers were brought to tears by the content downloaded from the body cams and smartphones belonging to the Hamas killers. Guardian next. Bombardment of Gaza continues amid talks to free more hostages. Quest for more powerful AI reckless, say experts. That's artificial intelligence. It's basically computers running the world, surely better than politicians. And cost of living leaves 1 million UK children destitute. The Telegraph now. EU clash with UK and US on ceasefire. France and EU leaders backed a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, setting up a clash with Britain and America as ground troops were poised to invade Gaza. Also, Israel shows Hamas slaughter to the world. Farage reveals NatWest staff gloated over his debanking, and Met chief chasm exists between the law and public expectation. Last but not least, The Independent. Met Police chief tells Braverman we need new powers to stop jihad protest chants. And criminal justice crisis. Where have all the judges gone? Record number of rape and violent crime cases being delayed as the shortage of judges causes unprecedented backlog in a shocking indictment of our creaking criminal justice system. Now, a big reaction to a lot of our topics on email, mark@gbnews.com. It's been revealed that 2.2 million people who receive benefits are not seeking employment. So a strong reaction on email, as I say. Briefly, this from Tim. Hi, Mark. What I never understand is how someone on benefits can receive more than someone that does a working week. Surely it has to be right that you actually get paid less if you're not working. And Chris says, Mark, I don't like benefit cheats, just like most people. But I think this is just another Tory tactic to get everyone's back up. There are always going to be a small minority that take advantage of the system, and it isn't our priority. It shouldn't be where the government focus their energy either. Thank you for that. Reacting to the big stories of the day, it is my top pundits. And I'm delighted to have Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, with British prisons reaching full capacity and the scourge of shoplifting skyrocketing, costing British traders almost £1 billion a year, could decriminalisation be the solution? The US state of California recently declared any theft under the value of $950 as a misdemeanor rather than a felony, effectively decriminalising thefts below this value, which has taken pressure off local police but done little to stop the shoplifters. Back in Blighty, our government is considering a very different solution with plans to whack GPS tracking devices, commonly worn by domestic abusers and burglars, on the ankles of Britain's most prolific shoplifters. So what do we think about this? Carol, should Britain follow California's lead?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's just the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. You know, and everything that we're talking about doing here, I mean, it sounds great, but it's never going to happen. You know, You mentioned a figure as nearly £1 trillion. I think it was like something like 953 million it cost retailers last year, all the nicked stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but cops have told people here in shops that if it's under 200 quid, they're not going to even bother to turn out. Now, you know, the retailers have got together and they've come up with this idea called Project Pegasus, where they're all going to club in, John Lewis, Tesco, club in with 800 grand to give to the police, to create a special force to kind of police all of this. Now, hang on, we already pay the cops £4 billion a year to do exactly this. Why are we paying them more money? And you know what's going to happen? It's going to become this little squad, little private squad in a station, and if you're on the shoplift, it's got to be a nice little number, and you won't have to do much. You go out to a couple, but not many.
Yeah, it'd be like Bagsy Waitrose for me, boss.
I'll have Waitrose, you have John Lewis. But also I'm thinking that, you know, the big stores have had security guards for a very long time. They had these big burly guys on the doors who look terrifying. But they've all been instructed by the stores not to attack or not to approach someone who's nicking stuff in case they get abusive or pull a knife out or get, you know, thing. So what is the point of employing a security guard if he can't employ security?
Yeah.
So the retailers in many ways deserve this, and the cops need to start doing their job. I mean, they're not controlling protests, so the least they could actually do is get on and look after the retailers and shoplifters. And don't give me this tosh about not being enough cops on the street. There are more cops on the streets now than there have ever been before, ever.
Indeed. Belinda, what do you think? How about these tags or name and shame?
Tags, orange jumpsuits, you name it, put them in whatever shows the public that there are consequences to these actions. Yeah. Decriminalising...
What if they're shoplifting out of desperation to feed their kids?
I'm really sorry, but a law is the law and it must be equal for absolutely everyone. Starting to excuse criminality puts us on a very dangerous, slippery slope. There's a theory called the broken window theory, which is used to describe decaying neighbourhoods. And it's all about how the more lawlessness and disorder there is and is allowed, the more it creates. And it emboldens even more serious crimes to take place. So we must be much firmer with petty criminals. I don't think the answer is sending them all to jail. I think hard labour, filling in the potholes, cleaning graffiti off the walls, with jackets on saying giving back to the community. In Orange, I think that was actually Jack's...
Or even thief on it.
Thief, yeah. We need to... And there has to be some kind of punishment and shame that comes with this, because there are victims behind all these stats.
Yeah.
Over 370,000 shoplifting offences have been conducted in the last year. That is a rise of 25%. It's getting worse. It's getting more lawless because, of course, TikTok and social media encourages gangs and the police can't get a grip on it.
But we already know who these people are because there's facial recognition and they're all on cameras. So why aren't the cops even going to their home after they've nicked the stuff?
Because they're behind computers doing hate crimes and nonsense like that.
Benjamin,
we need to be
Benjamin,
tougher.
I can see you in an orange jumpsuit.
Oh, I can't.
I actually have a beautiful orange jacket. So
I bet you do.
People might think I'm a thief just from wearing my own fashion choices. Look, there are two things going on here with this rise in thefts. Because the government and the Home Office has said we're going to treat it more like organised crime. Well, much of it is organised crime, and that's why it's been fuelled. You know, people are stealing to order for a black market of products, and that is the kind of thing that sophisticated policing classic policing should be able to deal with. But then on the other hand, you do have, and you always have this in troublesome economic times, we know that one of the most common things to be stolen is baby formula. Now, there are going to be many of those people that are stealing that, and of course it's still wrong, but they are doing that out of desperation, and a desperation that anyone put in their shoes would be able to understand how they justify it.
You can't keep doing
this. And the idea that a mum who is so poor...
This is what the left do all of the time. There are more than 50% of people in this country on some kind of benefit, and I don't believe there are families who've got starving babies. It's just not the case. You get benefits for exactly that. Our welfare system, you know, we've got 5.5 million people not in work. We've got 2.2 million who never need to apply for a job ever again. Benefits, people get benefits to stop exactly what you're describing.
But Benjamin, the top three goods that are stolen,
the
top three goods that are stolen, it's alcohol, it's confectionery, and then, as you said, it's high-item things they can sell on. The top items are not nappies and baby food.
Look, first of all, the 2.2 million, they don't never have to apply for a job again. Many of those people are parents of young children, and so that's how they're currently in that group.
OK, so if you want to clarify, let's clarify it. So what you have to do, because the people who don't have to apply for a job are generally on universal credit, and all they have to do is 9 hours work a week. Why aren't they made to do 25 hours work a week?
Because they have young kids or disabilities.
Yeah, always.
But look,
no.
The fact is that, you could have, for example, a woman who's in an abusive relationship and she's not able to get the money to feed her kid. Someone like that having to wear a bright orange jacket, having their
accounts for a fraction of a percent of the thefts that are happening.
Excuses. Will we have more of this under a Labour government, apologising for criminals?
Yeah, well, crime was low under a Labour government. Economic growth was higher under a Labour government. Taxes were low under a Labour government. NHS waiting lists were low under a Labour government. Immigration was lower under a Labour government. Illegal immigration was lower under a Labour government.
What did you just say about immigration lower? It was Tony Blair who opened the gates, who put down our borders.
And if you didn't like that, you're going to hate what the Tories did.
Well, listen, it's all about opinions. What's yours? Mark at gbnews.com. Coming up as he gets the VIB treatment at the gas-guzzling American Grand Prix yesterday is Prince Harry in pole position for being the world's biggest eco-hypocrite. My panel return to debate that in tonight's edition of Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in Uncancelled, why has there been no outrage about alleged racism to a white England rugby player in the World Cup? Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie gives his expert analysis shortly, and it'll also get stuck into whether it's a matter of time before ITV acts this morning. Kelvin's next. See you in 2.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Let's tell you what, my brilliant guest, he's already started. It's time for Uncancelled. Yes, it's time for Uncancelled. And England rugby star Tom Curry has alleged the South African player Bongi Mbonambi called him a white C word during the World Cup semi-final loss on Saturday, language that Kelvin hasn't even heard in his life. Curry could be clearly heard on the referee's microphone making the allegation of a racist slur to the official in the 28th minute of the match before the ref told him to do nothing about it. World Rugby, the sport's governing body, has today formally opened an investigation into Curry's claim, but some supporters in South Africa believe that Mbonambi have been misheard and may have been speaking in Afrikaans. Critics have slammed the insipid response, arguing that if it had been the other way round and a slur was made against a black player, then there would be widespread condemnation and more swift action. Let's get reaction from Kelvin McKenzie. Kelvin, allegations of racism against a white rugby player, no outrage, why not?
Well, that's just the way it is, I'm afraid.
And in this particular case, they've now dreamed up the idea that the guy is speaking in Afrikaans, which, by the way, nobody knows whether that's true or not. The only point I would make about that, this allegation was made on Saturday night. Here we are Monday night, 48 hours later. If there were nothing in this, why didn't the South Africans come out straight away and say, this is what happened? We use the word kante, which apparently means something like, I don't know, team or side. And so I presume it's a load of cobblers.
I think that's interesting. When I used to work for you at Talk Radio and Talk Sport, you called me Kante quite a lot. I didn't realise it was flattery.
It was. In fact, it was in lieu of a pay rise, right? And you've got another 7 Kantes today. But isn't it bizarre about whether it is white or black, the allegation? Why is it that the C word, which is the most disgusting word in terms of vulgarity, that's fine. So you are a C word, right? If I said you were a white C word, I end up at Old Street Magistrates Court charged under a hate crime. I find that utterly bizarre, and I'm not sure what do people, white people, brown people, black people, do they feel insulted by having their natural aspect of their life, which they can't do anything about, used as an insult? Why don't they feel more insulted? Why isn't it more of an action if somebody called you a C word? Why aren't you carted off for that?
Absolutely. It's a very abusive word. It's disgusting language. I've never heard you use it. And listen, here's a question.
Well, you haven't heard me use it tonight, anyway.
That's it. You're on your best behaviour and you've not had a drink yet. But can you be racist towards a white person? That's a big question, isn't it? After, centuries of oppression.
I've heard all that, old cobblers. The truth about the matter, there are nasty people in every single race, and they have all been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and they can be vile to each other, and they're always thinking up vile ways. Better that they're vile to each other by calling themselves C words or F words or whatever than what's going on currently in the Middle East. If you had the choice, where does that come? Where does that come on the vilometer, right? So I am never appalled by somebody. You want to have a good laugh? I roll up at the idiots on Twitter pouring tubloads on me. I sit there. In fact, there's some of them are so vile, I send them to my brother, and we roll up at the idea. And the C word, the use of the C word, is phenomenal. Yeah. And the truth about the matter is, you don't care about who's saying this kind of stuff. But I do find it odd that colour becomes the bigger issue. Aren't people proud of their colour, whether they're white, brown or black? So if somebody says that, so what?
Correct. Well, I'm a Dolan, and I used to get called an Irish so-and-so at school, and I lapped it up because I'm proud of my heritage. You're absolutely right. You founded Talk Sport, which is still going strong. You have a passion...
In fact, it seems to be going better without me, actually.
Stop it. Far from it.
It's a shocker.
Far from it. It's lost its soul. You've got a passion for football. You love sport. You love football, and you made sport a big priority at The Sun, and you were very successful with that. The back page was as compelling as the front. Do you think too much is made of what is said in the field of battle? Why are we even finding out what they shout at each other? Because in cricket they call it sledging, don't they?
Yes, although I honestly say that if somebody had called somebody a white C during a county cricket match between Essex and Lancashire, I think that would be a big story, to be fair. However, there are things that are said, and you cannot say them anymore.
And these are men. I mean, they're men in the field of battle. Do we make too much of it? Well,
in the field,
isn't the job of yelling obscenities
in the field of battle? Yeah. And I'm an Israeli troop, and I'm taking on some people in the Middle East. I think I would be saying worse things than that as I made my way through Gaza.
Kelvin, ITV are scratching around looking for someone to replace Holly Willoughby in This Morning. Is it a matter of time before they axe the show now?
Yeah, I think it is. And also, the ITV management are completely hopeless. I mean, after all, she completely blindsided them. Well, blindsided them. She signed a contract, and then 2 minutes later, something very unhappy happened in her life. She had the allegations of attempted murder, etc. And she decided she didn't want to do it anymore, right? So they've lost Schofield. They've lost Holly, and actually they've lost their audience. Their audience has fallen by 30 or 40%. Nobody wants that daytime stuff anymore. One of the problems about ITV today is that they are an unwanted network, and actually streaming is everything, and unfortunately very little is that free-to-air ad-funded networks.
This is a failure of management, though, isn't it?
Their management is hopeless.
They dithered and delayed about replacing Holly.
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful that Rupert Murdoch buys it. I say it's chump.
What, ITV?
It is chump change for Rupert. It's a couple of billion quid. He could literally, in fact, he could call up his son and say to him, "I tell you what, have a look in your back pocket, son. We're buying ITV," and then rejuvenate it. This lot. I mean, the guy in charge of content. He's been doing that job for about 30 or 40 years. I mean, if you come into him and said, "I've got a good idea," he said, "What's that then, Kevin?" He said, "It's Dad's Army. What do you think? Do you think it'll work?" Right? And honestly, it's all over. And the other aspect about this morning is there isn't all that talent. Because being presenter talent, as you know, and in fact you're a good example of it, is to a penny. No, I'm joking about that. And the truth about the matter.
By the way, you've just lost me a gig with Kevin Ligo. I mean, the guy's, you know, he put me on Channel 4, by the way. So be careful what you wish for.
No. Well, in fact, that's a fairly good example of where his talent base lies, don't you think?
Listen, what about ITV's new rule? The management have introduced a new rule where you're going to have to tell your line manager who you're friends with on set because they don't want a Schofield sequel.
Right. Yes. I think about that. The Friends thing is ridiculous. However, most companies, right, now, if somebody is having a relationship with somebody, you have to go and tell them. Because there's normally an imbalance, it could be male or female, it doesn't really matter, in the hiring. And you might be in a hiring position or in a position to give them a pay rise. People have got to know. Over at News UK, the editor of The Sun was Rebecca Brooks, and she was having an affair with the editor of the News of the World. So it stopped them going home early anyway, every night. But so
they were on the job.
They were on the job all the time. So I'm not hostile to that, but the idea of having to write down who your friends are, I mean, that is totally bizarre.
It's creepy.
But that's the whole of ITV is coming to a grinding halt.
One more pearl of wisdom from Kelvin McKenzie. Nigel Farage, arguably the most consequential politician of his generation. He has not ruled out becoming the leader of the Conservative Party if they collapse after the next election. I asked him again tonight. He said, "I'll do what I can. I'll roll my sleeves up if I have to." So that was a clear bit of leg to the sort of Tory grassroots. Could it happen? Could he be parachuted into the party in 2026, for example?
I find it unlikely, mainly because they would reject him, right? They don't want a successful person in the Conservative Party. You've seen what's happened. We had three Tory prime ministers in 45 days. They were all hopeless at their time. They don't want a Nigel Farage. They think they'd be too disruptive. However, they're going to have to find their own Nigel Farage.
And does that person exist?
Nigel is a clever guy. He told me so himself, actually, funnily enough.
And not shy about coming forward, much like your good self.
Yeah, so
But I mean, if he was leader, they'd romp to victory. It would be the biggest landslide ever, wouldn't it?
Well, I still don't rule out Rishi. I know it sounds absolutely ludicrous.
You said you've been sober for 3 days.
Yes. Well, the only reason I say I don't is I expect the economy to cheer up a little, as long as there isn't World War III coming around the corner.
Well, I agree with you. I think Rishi is sort of underrated. I think as the potential CEO of the country, I think he edges it over Starmer, and I think that's the big sell in a year's time.
Right. So if he can ship everybody out to Rwanda, he'll come close to winning. If he can't, I'm afraid he'll be pushing a broom outside Aldi's.
Kelvin, thanks for putting me on the Big Boys Breakfast in 1998. I never look back. Brilliant stuff. Thank you to Kelvin McKenzie. Listen, lots more to get through, and it's tonight's Union, Jackass and Greatest Britain. And so, Carol, your Greatest Britain, please.
My Greatest Britain is Sir Bobby Charlton, England's greatest ever footballer, who died at the weekend, aged 86. I'm old enough to remember him dazzling us all. I remember the adoration, the respect, the hysteria. Oh, shut up, go, get out. He was held in huge respect by the British people. He was very sadly diagnosed in 2020 with dementia, but he will be defined by his legacy as the man who gave people some of their happiest football moments ever.
Brilliant stuff. I completely agree with that. How about your nomination for Greatest Britain, Benjamin?
Mine is the shock new Labour MP for Mid Bedfordshire, Alistair Strathern. who overturned one of the biggest majorities ever overturned to replace Nadine Dorries, a woman who I don't think knew where Mid-Bedfordshire was, based on how little time she spent there. So I think huge congratulations to him. And in his thanks speech when he got elected, he thanked a 90-year-old voter who'd voted Labour his whole life and never got a Labour MP. And I just thought that was a really classy way to say thank you to
he does seem like an impressive chap. Big future. How about you, Belinda? Your greatest
My
Britain?
greatest Brits, it's plural. It is a wonderful group of Brits. Alison Pearson, Toby Young, Laura Dodsworth, Emma Webb, Francis Hoare, among others. This is a group of wonderful Brits who've set up the October Declaration, which anyone can sign on BritishFriendsOfIsrael.org. It's a wonderful showing of our solidarity with British Jews standing against anti-Semitism and calling for the release of the hostages. I think it's a wonderful thing to set up.
Well, I'm delighted to be in the 200 signatures of that declaration.
I've signed it too.
And well done you, Belinda. OK, look, clock's against us, so briefly, if you can, Carol, I'm going to give it to you, Bobby Charlton, for Greatest Britain.
Good.
Your Jackass of the day.
OK, my Jackass is the oh-so-eco Prince Harry. He's showing off his green credentials, telling the rest of us how we must help save the planet. He flies around the world on private planes. This weekend, he spent the weekend with the Mercedes team ahead of the US Grand Prix the weekend. So there he was, petrol-head at one of the most carbon-burning, whatever. Anyway, he's a stinking hypocrite.
Too right. Benjamin,
mine is a woman called Latifa Abu Shakra, if I pronounced that right. She went on ITV News to say, people are calling me terrorist. The hatred to Muslims like me is appalling. And then it turned out that she's a presenter on what many would perceive as a pro-Hamas channel, propagandising for the terrorists.
Blow her a raspberry. Belinda, Jackass.
Very quickly, mine has to be the London Underground tube driver who encouraged the tube full of the public to chant pro-Palestine chants. Can you imagine what it must have felt like being Jewish with the tube conductor doing such horrifically politically charged chants?
He is the winner of tonight's Union Jackass.
And he's been suspended,
And he's been suspended. Listen, thank you so much to my brilliant panel tonight, the team behind the glass, and most importantly, you for your company. Headliners is next. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.
Hello, very good evening. I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather update. It's already started to turn a bit wet and windy across some parts, but the wind and rain will become more widespread as we go overnight into Tuesday. There's a system pushing its way northwards up from France, but also a separate front that's currently making its way northeastwards across southwestern parts of the UK. This will bring some heavy rain as we go through the end of the day across southwest Wales in particular, and then spread into more central parts through the early hours. Also some persistent rain starting off in the southeast, pushing into more eastern northeastern England through the early hours of Tuesday too. A fairly mild night for many, though it could be a little chilly across the northwest of Scotland, perhaps a touch of frost here. For many, Tuesday is going to be a much wetter picture than on Monday. Heavy persistent rain across northern eastern parts of England. Could see some high totals, could be some disruption here, chance of some flooding too. Elsewhere, some bright sunny spells, but also a scattering of showers, and these showers could turn heavy, perhaps even thundery towards the south. Temperatures near normal for the time of year. We're looking at highs around 14 or 15 Celsius in the south, cooler further north. Into Wednesday, we will see a spell of wet weather across the southeast to start, and also some rain pushing into eastern parts of Scotland, perhaps northeast England. That could turn a little bit heavy at times, and coming so close to the heavy rain we saw last week, it could make ongoing issues worse. And otherwise, as we go through the rest of the week, we're staying with the unsettled picture with further wind and rain, but temperatures near normal.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m.